It is such a pleasure to be here. I'm humbled and delighted. Thank you so much, George, for this warm welcome. We are excited to be a part of the Greek Festival, and I'm honored to be able to introduce my distinguished colleague, Dr. Aliki Miliati. My name is Paul Monson. I'm the director of the architecture program at Utah Valley University. And I'm also the president of a nonprofit called the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, the Utah chapter. Our website is classicistutah.org. If you're interested in more lectures like this, building tours, travel programs, and workshops and classes to learn more about classical architecture, that's what we do. And tonight we are delighted to have Dr. Aliki Miliati give us a lecture called A Golden Thread, Timeless Lessons from Classical Architecture. I'd like to introduce Dr. Miliati. She received a PhD and a Master of Architecture in Restoration of Monuments, as well as a Master of Architecture and Engineering degree from the National University of Athens in Greece. For the last 25 years, she has lived, trained, and worked as a licensed and registered professional architect and academic educator specializing in the study, research, and restoration of monuments and contemporary building architecture technology. She now teaches at Brigham Young University and at the architecture program of UVU. Her professional and academic career attests to her passion for architecture and reflects the view that architecture is an intellectual discipline, both an art and a science. Please welcome Dr. Aliki Miliati.
Okay. So thank you very much, Professor. And what a wonderful day is this. Welcome. And let me thank Father George and the community, the Hellenic Cultural Association, my colleagues, and the students at the Utah Valley University Architecture and Engineering Design Program, and the president, both the members of the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, for giving me the opportunity to present the lecture under the title, A Golden Thread, Timeless Lessons from Classical Architecture. This is a theme that all my colleagues and I are teaching and researching for in various different ways and at all levels of our program of architecture. It would actually take more than one lecture to cover the topic, so today I will focus on some of the main concepts that simply touch the surface of it. Due to the diverse audience we have today, I will not engage in too many technical terms, and I hope that you will enjoy this lecture as much as I enjoyed preparing it. I will begin with a quote by the great Finnish architect, Juhani Palasmo. Buildings are instruments and machines of time. They enable us to see and understand the past and history, and to participate in time cycles that surpass individual life. This quote could not be more true right now, at this moment, as I am standing here before you in this sacred space. An American among Americans and a Greek among Greeks. Holy Trinity Church is a building that connects all of us with the time cycles and the history of this city since the 1870s, when the first Greeks immigrated to Utah to work in the mines. And they counted neither hard work nor sweat in order to build this church. This building represents the very first strong foundation and evidence of collective effort and memory for the creation of our incredible Greek community of Salt Lake City. It also gives us an opportunity to show you how someone could study the thread of classical architecture. So, Holy Trinity Church is what we call in architectural terms a basilica, an architectural type dominant in Christian architecture. To mention two of the most famous basilicas in Christianity is Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, now Istanbul, and St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. In reality, the origins of this architectural type can be traced back to the classical Athens of 600 BC. And this architectural type reaches Christianity through the Roman world. So here is the thread that we are searching for this architectural type of the basilica. So you can see here in the slides, the first basilica existed in ancient Athens. It was called Basilios Stoa. That's how the word basilica originates. And it was a building that was kept for justice and to keep records. So it was a civic building, a public building for justice. The Romans take this architectural type of basilica and they expand this architectural type. They take from Basilios Stoa. So we are coming 300 years later than the creation of Basilios Stoa, with the first Roman basilicas. This one is one of the first, Basilica Aemilia, 179 BC in Rome, and in reality, they expand the space in width and also in height. So what they create is we have the transition of this type from classical Athens through classical Rome, and we can talk about innovation by transposition. So this is when an architectural type of one building is carried from civilization to civilization and through different periods of time in an evolved stage, not exactly as it was. So here we are in Salt Lake City. Why should we care about timeless lessons of classical architecture? We are spaced so far away from Athens and in time, 2,500 years back. And some of these timeless lessons I will mention, and it can be one, because classical architecture combined all sciences and arts and created a holistic architecture. And this is very relevant to us today, because we are striving to do the same thing. Also, the cultural symbols are crystallized in ancient Greece and conceptualized relatively quickly in sculptural geometric forms, which acquire timeless, supralocal, and intercultural characteristics. And creating this lecture, I was thinking of this concept a lot lately, and I believe that this is the power of classical architecture, and that's why it was created mainly by Ionians, Dorians, and Greeks, that they put their cultural symbols there. In reality, it's intercultural architecture, because every civilization ever after got this baseline of classical architecture, and they were able this type of architecture allows for each culture and each nation to put their own symbols in this type of architecture. So it is an international architecture. It is what we would say the architecture of freedom that allows to every society to find their own expressions at the same time, keeping a style that is unified and that is holistic. So it's not accidental that you have this type of architecture that adopted by the Romans. And then when the western part of the Roman Empire collapsed, it's adopted by the Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Gauls, and by the Europeans during the Renaissance, and during the Balkan areas, and in the whole Near East, up to Egypt. And then, of course, here in the United States, much later. And it was used and adopted to express every time the spirit and the dynamism of every culture and every nation that used this type of architecture. There is no other architecture type that we find that is spreading in time and in geographical space as much as classical architecture. If you have watched the Brigger dancing out of the festival, you will see that Greece is so small, but yet for every region we have their own music, their own dancing, their own set of clothes, their own tradition. And yet, classical architecture was able to express, every region was able to be expressed and insert their cultural symbols through classical architecture. Let me give you an example. What would you think if I told you that the Triglyphs, and I will explain, it's this characteristic ornament that has these three vertical bands separated by V-shaped grooves, that these triglyphs that we now mostly consider as a decorative ornament, in reality, and you find them on the entablature of every temple and now in almost every building in Europe and here in the United States, historic style, that they are the religious cultural symbol of the tribes, of the cultures, that the Dorians, when they were a nomadic tribe, they would use and they would dedicate the sanctuaries to make sacrifices even before they had temples. This became so religious. I have a pottery that shows that the tripods and the controls are dedicated to gods. So they decided to put this cultural symbol as a dedication to religious symbol to their gods. Right now, so the success, and I'm showing you some pictures to prove this theory, which is widely accepted right now. It's the only theory accepted about the origins of the triglyphs of Professor Mark Jones. He's an authority on Greek architecture. And you see how it was they're carrying the tripods for their gods, even from the Mycenaean times. But you see how quickly, within, let's say, 300 years, these forms solidified in abstract geometrical shapes, and they stopped symbolizing the tripod itself. This is rare, a unique phenomenon in history of art, and we owe it to Greeks because they would invite this duality of vision. So in Greek architecture, classical architecture, and classical sculpture,
It's not what do you see with your optical vision, you see geometric shapes, is what you understand with your intellectual vision when you know what you are looking at. So this is the success of classical architecture, that these forms very quickly acquired other approaches, and they were able to be expressed through other ethnic groups, even the same using their own cultural symbols, but yet with the classical vocabulary of classical architecture. So the transfer of cultural symbols is not, in classical architecture, is not meant to be understood with the optical vision. It is only apparent to those who know what they are looking at. One of the first lessons that I would like to address today is that in many ways, classical urbanism and classical architecture are connected to the democratic form of government and shaped our cities and our building environment. And how is that? Let me show you the types of buildings that existed in classical Greece. Private buildings, public buildings, temples, sanctuaries, shrines, parliament, courthouse, markets, libraries, stadiums, music halls, theaters, academies, schools, gymnasiums, baths, and in funerary architecture, mausoleums, necropolis, funerary stelae, fortifications, military architecture, and other buildings, choragic buildings, fountains, aqueducts, and altars. And in urbanism, this is the ancient city of Milos in Asia Minor, now Turkey. And if you recognize the grid system, this is in Podamus, the first urban planner and the father of the grid system in ancient Greece. And you recognize the influence, the direct influence that comes almost 2,600 years, like it's the same. You can even see that this space here, that is left from the market, the open area here, you can see how it even exists there as well. And of course, we do have our temples and our churches as the Athenians had. And this is the ancient Athens and the civic buildings. And I will try to compare ancient Athens with Salt Lake City. In Athens, they did have the Athenian Mint. Our mint is in San Francisco. They did have a courthouse. We do have a courthouse. A Senate. We have a Congress, and we have our state capital. A conservatory music hall. We have a brotherly hall. A market. And a library. If we want to go inside the buildings, this is how the ancient parliament looked like, and this is how our Congress is today. It's pretty astonishing, huh? How similar, how the same, but how can this happen? I mean, haven't we evolved, progressed? I mean, we kind of, that's 2,500 years before. Now, and we still have the same set of buildings. How can this happen? A stadium. This is our Rio Tinto. These are the very first stadiums of Olympia, the Amphitheaters Stadium, the Delphi,
and the State Convention Scene, and of course, the Panathinaikos Stadium in Athens. The music hall, our capital theater, and not be fooled by the absence of the Herodian theater. We now know Professor Manuel Scoresti got awarded for this discovery 10 years ago. It was roofed, and it held for 1700 years the world record of having the largest single roof without supporting intermediate columns, the Herodian theater. So even the Greek music halls were roofed, and we do have the same type. And you see how the typology is similar with the stage, the scenery, the scenes, everything is the same. The theaters. Right now, here we do not have open air theaters. All Greek theaters were open air. Schools. Our UVD campus in Athens, they did have 3 academies. Even the forms of buildings look similar to what existed 2,500 years ago. Our state capital, even the architectural form of the Corinthian capitals is so similar with the Olympian Zeus in Athens, the Temple of Zeus in Athens. So the explanation for all these similarities is that we do have democracy, the political government of democracy. And each political form of government comes with its own set of buildings. Let me give an example to explain better. The theaters of democratic Greece and democratic Rome are similar. You see on the left the theater of Epidaurus, and on the right the theater of Pompey in Rome. And they are similar in also the events that they would have. So, action comedies, tragedies, the reason why we have the development, the invention and development of the theater, again, is democracy. You want to entertain your citizens, but because they vote, you want to educate them through theater. And all the theatrical performances, they are a great stage for making political comments. And all this development, all this philosophy about the human behavior and existence and our relationship with our natural world. But with the fall of the Roman Republic and the transition to the Roman Empire, nobody, no citizen needs to vote anymore. So you have the transformation, you have the amphitheaters, which constitute a total different architectural type of building, and you do not have performances like theatrical performances. You have gladiators that are fighting in there. You just have only entertainment. They do not need anymore the educational part of the theater. So you have the appearance of this. So each form of, so the empire comes with this set of buildings and abandons the set of buildings that they express the democratic. The third lesson that we can get from classical architecture is that democracy creates the framework of the way in which public projects are planned and realized. And as you may have already guessed, we learn nowadays these procedures from classical architecture and planning. How did we learn? We have the ancient texts that have survived engraved on building inscriptions. Now, the example that we see that was found in the Acropolis of the Erectric,
For example, in the case of the planning and the construction of the mixed necropolis, the inscriptions were displayed in public areas so as to make all the above information available to all citizens, since great sensitivity prevailed in common matters. They described the manner of the work of the committees, defined the obligations of the contractors and included descriptions, accounts, committee reports of additional items, all in great detail. So we know that the Assembly of Citizens appointed directly an architect in charge of the project, as well as a small committee that will oversee his works. This is what we're doing today. The projects were approved by the Parliament, which were responsible for controlling public funds and prosecuting the offenders. This is what happens today. The architect prepared the plans as well as exact specifications of the project. Subsequently, the committee assigned parts of the project to contractors or individual craftsmen. The financial committee were of short duration, yearly, for obvious reasons, but they had great responsibility and some power since they delegated the project's director to groups of craftsmen. But the scientific committee consisted of members who would follow the project from the beginning to the end. The architect was responsible for the faithful following of given specifications and for the maintaining of a superior standard of workmanship. Architects built plans and miniature models of the buildings as well as prototypes, which the craftsmen would copy. We follow quite the same procedures today for our public projects, because this is how democracy works. It is no different than, so architecture follows and our profession follows the same rules and same procedures as that time. The fourth timeless lesson comes to us from one of the most famous architects of the world, Ictinus. He is the architect of the Parthenon in Athens and the temple of Epicurus Apollo at Basilica. So Ictinus is teaching us that architectural design and innovation move within tradition. And please keep in mind this word tradition, because I will refer multiple times from now on to what tradition is and how we can move tradition, but also be very innovative. And these are the two temples, the Parthenon and the temple of Apollo at Basilica. And to make it more clear, I will show you that we're talking about the Parthenon, which is here. Now, you see this line division. These are the Ionians. All the Ionian temples are built by the Ionians. All the Doric, this is where the Dorians live. There are two distinct Greek ethnic groups with different traditions. So Ictinus is called not to design a building for the Athenians, the Ionians, the second time to design a building for the Dorians. And what is he doing? Totally two different plans, totally two different temples. Each one of the buildings is considered to represent the peak of innovation and aesthetics for what they are and what they want to be. But because the two temples are so different from each other, many colleagues over many years questioned if the two designs belong to the same architect, namely Amphitheaters. These colleagues are influenced by today's demand that successful architects should have their own unique design style, something like a trademark that will make their buildings immediately recognizable. Guided by this notion, they cannot see that the genius of Ictinos, you see how different, this is a pattern of Basilica. They cannot see that the genius of Ictinos led him to move along the traditions of Athens on the first time and the traditions of the Peloponnese the second time. And I want to show you the most ancient Doric temple that we have. This is the temple of Hera at Olympia, and caution your attention about the existence of these engaged piers, that it was the Peloponnesian, the Doric tradition for the Doric temples in that area. And despite the fact that Ictinos was Athenian himself, and his Parthenon is a Doric temple, he designed here, he followed this tradition that we found, and he felt that he had to follow this tradition at the A second example, again, is given us by Ictinos as the architect of the Parthenon, and this is the Ionic frieze of the Parthenon. So the Ionic frieze of the Parthenon is has caused a lot of debate because it depicts two different processions. It starts from they start from the northwest corner of the Parthenon. One procession goes eastbound, the other procession goes westbound. These processions, they constitute of different sets of numbers of people. One has the number 10 and the other has the number 4, like in the composition of how the horses, the people are. And there was a huge debate for the interpretation of what does this mean. Finally, we have the final interpretation widely accepted by the famous archaeologists again, 8 years ago, famous Italian archaeologist Luigi Peschi. So, and this is respect to their tradition. It shows so we know that the frieze shows Athenians of various classes grouped so as to correspond to the organization of the Athenian state. In fact, the groups reflect the successive forms of organization, with the earlier system of the 4 tribes on the north side and the more recent, the democratic system of the 10 tribes on the south side. So this is a huge lesson that comes to us from classical architecture, the realization that nothing innovative and advanced that we can achieve on ourselves. In reality, we stand on the shoulders of all those who came before us. Even if that system is a system that we rejected and we now progress to a democratic system, it's still the previous system provided the foundation and the baseline for this advancement and for this greater evolution. So that's the respect to the tradition, the respect to all those who came before, and this is one of the greatest lessons that classical architecture can give us today. And I come to this example to show you how two architects saw the proposals for the new Acropolis Museum. You have the studio in Mesquite that proposed this building in Athens for the Acropolis Museum, which is totally ignoring any tradition and ignores even the program and the reason why we chose a specific lot to build the Acropolis Museum and the relationship that this museum has with the sacred rock of the Acropolis and the Parthenon. And you see that this studio, I put all of the other buildings that they have proposed, they have designed and executed world. And the building that they proposed, unfortunately, could be a building that you can just put anywhere in the world. And we didn't want that. That's why we chose the revolutionary architects at the Amphitheaters. So his famous architect in Athens who collaborated with Natsui. And here you see you have the building that is tailored and designed only for that specific issue. You see that the first floor is third as to so this building in reality and also the three elements. The one is very useful as to be able to accommodate excavations and the archaeological findings that we have under the soil of Athens. And if you take this building and put it anywhere else, it just doesn't make sense. But if it's there, it does. If you have a north, that's on the east side of the Parthenon, and take this building to change. So it's designed with some principles that we expect the place, the specific place, and the tradition of the people of Greece. I understand that some of us, we find it's very difficult to have two architects to agree and to like, all of the buildings of totally agree on architecture. But and maybe the volume of this building could be a concern, but that's another matter of debate. And that's how the building right now looks from inside. Finishing, I would like to stress that classical monuments are the everlasting testimony of our intellect and our achievements as humanity. And because human nature hasn't changed since antiquity to the present day, if we remain true to the principles, values, and ideas, this cross-cultural classical architecture represents, and if we keep the timeless lessons that it will offer to us, then we can be reassured that the course we follow will ultimately reflect a positive imprint, as it is based on a timeless framework of values that promote and eventually bring to light the forces of progress and not the destructive ones. Thank you very much.